I think that maybe Mac Jones surprised people a little bit, maybe surprised me a little bit watching him play in that preseason. And it just looks so much more like the old Brady offense, especially that two tight end set that they used to run back in the day. But Mac Jones kind of has a similar body type, a movement kind of thing, but he was very calm, very relaxed in the pocket. He looked good in that game.
Yeah, I thought he looked poised, and he's kind of that throwback type quarterback. And he can actually move a little bit too. I was at a training camp practice a week ago, and he was making some throws on the move that I didn't really know that he could make heading into that practice. I know we saw a little bit of that at Alabama, but no, you're absolutely right. He's allowing them to run what they did for so many years with Tom Brady. And that's not to compare him to Tom Brady, but because of that, I do think that he's got a legitimate chance to start this season. And I think he's still in the running, possibly to start in week 1 for New England.
All right, well, welcome into the Chris Collinsworth podcast. Today, we're going to unearth some stories for you within the PFF broadcast team. We've got a whole new news division that we're very excited about, and we're going to have 3 of the key guys on today to go over all the stories of the day. Ari Merev, Doug Kite, and Brad Spielberg are all going to be a part of the program. This is really, as we get closer and closer to opening day, this is really what the NFL is all about, not so much the games on the field, if you will. But before we get there, I want to remind you about all the awesome products at PFF right now. It is already fantasy football season, and you may remember we had that little 40% off sale the last few weeks. The sale ended yesterday, but a little special gift to you if you're listening to this show. If you use promo code SAVE40 for my listeners, we're going to take advantage and let you guys take advantage of that old sales price. So you can get access to PFF's Fantasy Football Draft Guide, complete with our player rankings and projections, College Football Preview Magazine, the first edition of the 2022 NFL Draft Guide, and unlock all the great PFF article content on our site. Again, use promo code SAVE40 for 40% off any PFF subscription. Get access to all the PFF fantasy tools. It is fantasy season, and it's only $5.99. And tell them Chris Collinsworth sent you. So now off we go here with the guy you're going to enjoy listening to with some of the really big stories of the game. Ari Merev up first. All right, welcome in Ari Merev now to the program. And you probably know Ari from My Sports Update, over 500,000 followers there, and has done a fantastic job. Now a part of the PFF team, and we're thrilled to have you. How's it been going so far?
Well, it's been going really well, Chris. You know, it's been a month so far now here at the company, and I've gotten to know a lot of people here. I mean, the company is just huge with so many people around here, and it's just been amazing. You know, everyone has been so nice. We all work off each other, and it's been just fabulous so far.
Yeah, it's the loony bin, as I like to call it down there. So, but it is a fun environment. It's the closest thing really to a locker room that I've experienced since leaving the game. So I always have a great time going to the office. So many things to cover here with you, and you got your hand on the pulse of just about everything. One that sticks out to me right away, of course, is the Michael Thomas situation in New Orleans. That got pretty ugly for a while.
It did. I mean, that situation was fascinating because, you know, they rewarded him with a very big extension in 2019. Then he has that record-breaking year. And then all of a sudden last year, you know, the season starts, they beat Tom Brady in his debut. And then he suffers an ankle injury in garbage time when he really should not have even been out there. And he wasn't happy about that. And that's really where this friction really started. You know, he was recovering from the injury. He had an ugly practice fight with a teammate, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. After that fight, he talked back to his coaches, including Sean Payton. They fined him a game check. They kept him inactive for a game. He came back, you know, that season, but he just wasn't himself. The ankle never fully healed. They wanted him to, you know, have surgery after the season. He got a second opinion. They said he could rehab it for a month and come back to us. And then he just never came back, and he went dark on the team. And, you know, eventually he reported in June to OTAs, and his ankle wasn't fully healed, and that's when he had the surgery, and now he's going to miss the start of the season. And of course, Sean Payton went public with this, saying the surgery should have happened much earlier, and it didn't. Thomas fired back on Twitter saying the Saints are trying to ruin my reputation. Both sides were just taking shots publicly, which is just so rare for the Saints. And there was a lot of chatter last year that they could look to trade him, but that contract is a really tough contract to trade, especially with the Saints salary cap situation. So I know both sides had a meeting on Saturday. Sean Payton and Michael Thomas, they spoke, but this situation, I don't think one meeting is just going to resolve all of this. This has been dating back to last year. I think too much has happened there for just one meeting to resolve this. So Sean Payton is not happy about all of it. But for the team, entering a new era without Drew Brees, whoever the quarterback is going to be, to not have Michael Thomas, to have like Marquez Callaway and Traquan Smith as your wide receiver is a very tough situation. So I'm still watching this Michael Thomas situation. I don't think it's over yet. I want to see how it all plays out because there is a lot of friction there.
But it doesn't sound like there's an alternative. It doesn't sound like that they could trade him or they could cut him or they could do anything with him other than just wait at this point, right? Financially, it just doesn't make any sense.
It's a very tough contract to trade. If they were to trade him, they end up paying him for 1 year and $40 million, which is just that's not how you do business in the NFL for a wide receiver, $40 million over 1 year. And then the dead cap money, I think it would be $9 million this year, $22 million next year. And considering how the Saints went all in with Drew Brees, just cap wise, it's pretty much impossible for them. But the Saints have done this type of stuff in the past. I mean, they traded Jimmy Graham after 1 year into his extension. They released Junior Gillette back in the day after 1 year into a big deal. So they have done this type of stuff in the past. If it doesn't get fixed, I am going to be watching to see what they end up doing because that is a very aggressive front office. We know that, and Mickey Loomis has made magic happen when it comes to the cap. So we're going to be watching this one very closely. Interesting.
The other one that, of course, is terrible to watch is Deshaun Watson on every front. It's a bad look for the league. It's a bad look for Houston. It's a bad look for Deshaun, who, by all accounts, most people down there, I mean, they used to sing this guy's praises, like what an unbelievable guy he was during the hurricanes. He gave his game check to the people that worked in the cafeteria, all these things, but it's just horror story after horror story coming out now. He's at practice, right? But not really doing anything. So where do they go from here?
It's such a tough situation because I think everyone agrees that both sides want to move on. I think the Texans are ready to move on. They signed Tyrod Taylor. They drafted a quarterback with their first pick, Davis Mills. They even gave guaranteed money to draft Driscoll. Like, they're ready to move on. And Deshaun doesn't want to be there, but he kind of has to be there because under the new CBA, you get fined $50,000 a day if you're not at training camp. So he's just there, just hanging around there. And it's just such an awkward situation. But, the reality of the situation is we're not going to know anything about this until we get clarity from the Houston Police Department, from the NFL that's doing their own investigation as well. I don't think we have clarity football-wise until we have clarity legal-wise. And until that happens, Deshaun's going to be there at Texans camp. It's going to be awkward with him there. And, it's just going to be very weird. Like, football-wise, I do think teams are interested in trading for him right now. There are teams who are checking in with Nick Cassera, but Nick Cassera, the GM of the Texans, he's not going to trade him unless he's able to get the full maximum value for a young franchise quarterback. He's not going to trade him for 80 cents on the dollar. So the Texans' point of view on this is, let's just say Deshaun does get suspended for 8 games. Let's just a hypothetical situation. You're not trading for Deshaun for 1 season. You're going to be trading him for the next 10 or 12 years. So we're going to want to get multiple first round picks. We're going to want to get a couple of young players from a team that is trading for him. So I don't think we're going to see a team giving up full value in a deal until there's clarity there. And then the other part about this is that it's not a trade that just happens in one GM and another. There's going to be ownership involved in this as well. They're going to want to know exactly what's going on. We're trading for a player who is a super talented player, but there's a big cloud over his head right now. So it's not as easy as it sounds. I think we're all just in a waiting pattern right now because there's way more to this than just football.
The saddest thing is the team that needs him the most is Houston. And they can't make that work there. Are there any other teams that you know about? I mean, let's pick something out of the air. The Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, if Ben retires, there are places obviously with great tradition that would be willing to give up a lot to get a quarterback that would be their quarterback for the next 15 years.
No, I think there are several teams that are closely monitoring this. Like I know there was a report a couple of weeks ago about the Eagles checking in on this. And, the Eagles have multiple first-round picks next year, possibly 3, if Carson Wentz, plays 75% of the snaps. So that's a team that could be interested if Jalen Hurts doesn't work out. I think if none of this happened, I think the Panthers would have for sure went after him. They have a very aggressive owner who is trying to get the quarterback position right. I think they would have given up multiple picks plus young defensive players to make that happen, because they're just taking swings right now at quarterbacks, right? They signed Teddy Bridgewater to the big contract. They gave up, a second round pick, a fourth round pick, and a 6th round pick for Sam Darnold, which a lot of people think they overspent for that. So that's a team that could potentially be interested there as well. I think Washington after this year, after Ryan Fitzpatrick is done, there could be an interesting team. There are multiple teams around the NFL that would be interested in Deshaun Watson, Denver as well. But again, there's a much bigger aspect to this right now that's much more important. So until that gets resolved, all this football stuff really doesn't matter.
Miami, part of me thinks that what if he just bit the bullet on this? In other words, just came out, took his punishment, even if it meant the entire season being gone, would the finality of having all of it behind him somehow, if that's even remotely possible, make more sense?
Again, it really, all of this doesn't matter until we get resolution on what's going on, because there are 22 women here who, have a civil lawsuit against him. So until we get anything there, all of this doesn't matter. I don't think any team is trading for him right now unless we have clarity there. It doesn't really matter what happens if he gets the year off. If the legal situation isn't clear, none of this matters right now. And that's why people are checking in with the Texans. That is happening. They might be working on what could be a potential trade, what it would look like. But I don't think a trade is going to happen until we know what's going on there on the legal side. No owner is going to go out and say, yes, we're going to approve this trade until that happens. Could you imagine the papers in Philadelphia if a trade like that happens? I mean, I don't think any owner would be okay doing this with this big cloud over his head.
Yeah, and it's a different day and age right now too. I mean, can you imagine that deal and bringing somebody into your city, and people would lose their minds. I mean, it'd be the political topic one. Forget about the football side of it. It would be tough on any city for sure. Aaron Rodgers situation. It feels like it's sort of settled, I guess, at this point, but it's not really settled. Is this it? Is this one and done for him in Green Bay?
Chris, we did the podcast last month. Who could have imagined that on August 17th, this Aaron Rodgers stuff would be like a non-story anymore? Like we're not talking about it anymore. Like it's not on Sports Center. It's not on ESPN. We don't hear about it anymore. It's honestly amazing. Like the press conference that Aaron Rodgers did, it was so great to see. I mean, he was so brutally honest and he said what's on his mind. He communicated his message so everyone understands what his feelings were. I don't enjoy watching coaches and players act like robots on stage. I liked what I saw with Aaron Rodgers saying it how it is. And now, it's going to be interesting to see what happens this year, because he basically said he doesn't want to be a lame duck quarterback there in Green Bay, right? And, both sides came to an agreement. They figured out something because there was no chance they were going to trade him. They, tweaked that contract a little bit. And then, Brian Gutekunst, who, again, we know the relationship wasn't so great over there. He got his old friend in Randall Cobb. He did what Aaron Rodgers wanted. That's going to be a big part of this. Let's see if they could fix that relationship. A lot of people are saying this could be his own last dance. I could see a scenario where he'll be be back for multiple years in Green Bay. If both sides here could just talk and have proper communication and do a little bit similar to what's going on in Tampa Bay with Tom Brady, right? If they could just talk to Aaron Rodgers and hear his side of things, I think there is a situation here where, Green Bay could have another great year. They have a Super Bowl ready roster. They have a great running back, a number one wide receiver in Devontae Adams, David Bakhtiari, Jair Alexander, just top players in the league, not just, on their team, so this is a team that could make a Super Bowl. What if they make a Super Bowl run? What if they win the whole thing? Could there be a scenario where the Packers and Aaron Rodgers come back again next year and they're like, hey, we're willing to extend you, give you a 3-year deal, do something like that? I think both sides are clearly communicating well once again. I think there is a scenario here where Aaron is no longer that lame duck quarterback and he could end up finishing his career in Green Bay, as crazy as that might sound after all that happened this offseason.
I actually agreed with Aaron, and I'm with you. I was a huge fan of that press conference. And I think in part, that's why all the conversation ended, because he answered all the questions. Okay, if you just answer the questions, then we'll move on to something else. But as a decision maker, even within PFF, for me, you always want to talk to as many people as you can, especially a key figure that has insider information, if you will, about what goes on inside that locker room, the way an Aaron Rodgers would. Why wouldn't you want to talk to him? Why wouldn't you want Aaron Rodgers picking up the phone and recruiting players that you're trying to bring in as free agency? It all seems so logical. It was hard to make an argument the other way. I'm sure when I get up there, I'll hear some more of the other side of the story and what was going on. But it is a very, very unusual situation. We talked a little bit about New York, and New York is such an interesting town always, right? And on one side, you've got Robert Saleh and a new style, and everybody's fired up, and you think it's Justin Fields in town because everybody loves him so much. And then on the other side, you've got Joe Judge, and he's got a controversial or an interesting style of coaching that's sort of a little bit more in your face sort of a deal. Tell me about that contrast in that city.
It really is fascinating because, Robert Saleh is all energy. He's right there with his players. He's like a player, like the way he acts there. He's like one of them. And then, you have Joe Judge, who, is a little bit different. But I'll be honest with you, Chris, I like what Joe Judge is doing with the Giants. I really do. I'm here for New York. Let's put it this way. I've talked to a lot of Giants fans here. What they had before Joe Judge simply did not work. They were awful. Pat Shurmur and Ben McAdoo are great offensive coordinators, but they couldn't lead a team. They needed discipline. They needed focus. They needed an identity. It just wasn't working up until now. You bring in a guy like Joe Judge, who's very intense, who is very demanding. He swears a lot. I mean, he wants to get the most out of his players, but, that's who he is. It's authentic, it's genuine, and it's not an act. He reminds me of Tom Coughlin a little bit. If you look at the Giants last season, their players bought into this. They started the season 1-7, but they were in most of those games, and they almost beat the eventual Super Bowl champs on Monday Night Football. They finished the season 5-3. They almost won the division. They played tough for Judge. They were competitive every snap. I mean, if you remember, they beat Seattle in Seattle with Colt McCoy as their quarterback. I mean, that was impressive. So if you listen to everyone on this team, the veterans on this team, guys like Sterling Shepard, guys like Logan Ryan, they're all in on the way Joe Judge is handling this team. I like it. It's different. It's a different identity. And the Giants made a bunch of moves this offseason, most notably adding Kenny Galladay, adding a guy like Adoree Jackson. Daniel Jones is the X factor here, but this is a division that is wide open. And I really think they're going to be able to compete in this division here this year. I really do.
Flip over to the Jets for just a moment, because Zach Wilson to me is a guy that I thought looked really impressive in that preseason game. I loved him coming out. I thought he had a little bit of an Aaron Rodgers sort of flair to him, and I didn't see anything in the first one to take me off that opinion. But it was also a light went on for me watching that game that you could tell what Robert Saleh was going to do. He's going to play defense. He's going to use the 49ers running game with Mike LaFleur out there now. He's going to take pressure off his young quarterback, and he's just going to try and stay competitive to the fourth quarter and see what happens. I mean, every other young quarterback was throwing it 20, 22 times, and Saleh was like, just let's keep it nice and clean. Let's not get him hit. Let's take advantage. And for a guy that has to play his young quarterback, was a pretty good approach.
It was, and there really is a breath of fresh air there with the Jets, with Robert Saleh in, with Zach Wilson in, who's like, there's a lot of energy there for that team. I really did like what I saw out of Zach Wilson as well there in the preseason game. He didn't do any obvious mistakes. Whenever he had to check it down, he checked it down. I mean, like, I like the approach there. You talked about Mike LaFleur, Matt's brother. An interesting thing about him is that Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur, Mike's brother, wanted to bring him to Green Bay, and Kyle blocked it. Like, that's how important he was to San Francisco. So that tells you a lot there about what the Jets have in him. And then, defensively, like, all the players they brought in, it feels like they're fitting in nicely after one preseason game. I don't think they allowed any points until the fourth quarter. Robert Saleh is all energy. The players love playing for him. And you could just tell there's a different vibe there with the Jets. I mean, it's just so different there after all these years. Adam Gase clearly didn't work out there. Sam Darnold didn't work out there. They have Joe Douglas, a GM, who's taking a very smart approach to building this roster. They have multiple first-round picks next year. They have multiple second-round picks next year. They're slowly but surely building the offensive line. This is a team, if Zach Wilson does pan out, and they love him there, this is a team that is slowly but surely finally building a roster the right way, and there should be excitement there if you're a Jets fan. There really should.
Yeah, it's Vera Tucker still is not playing. Elijah Moore is still not playing. That both those guys injured. So I just think the Jets have a chance. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs or anything, but it would not surprise me. I know Robert Saleh very well, and he's a natural leader without being a screamer and a yeller. And I just have a feeling he's going to be a hugely successful head coach. One final note here. The Atlanta Falcons came out this week, 100% vaccinated. First one we've seen. There are money issues in the NFL because the salary cap is not anywhere close to what it had been budgeted for. With a lot of these teams, it's much lower than expected. So how do you think this vaccinated, not vaccinated kind of stuff is going to play in here?
It's a very interesting topic because, the NFL, first of all, has done a pretty good job of just, educating players and not forcing them to get it, even though the differences between being vaccinated and unvaccinated, it's really two different worlds. But, we're recording this here on Tuesday, and rosters must trim to 85 by 4 o'clock today, right? By the end of the month, rosters have to be at 53 for each team. Now, the NFL sent a memo last month saying, hey, you cannot cut a player based off their vaccine status. But if you look at the tea leaves around the league, look at what Ron Rivera has said, look at what Mike Zimmer has said, teams are not going to be following that rule. I mean, it's become pretty obvious. Like, if you're a top player who has a lot of guaranteed money and you can't get released, like Kirk Cousins, for example, who's not vaccinated, yeah, you're going to be on the roster. But let's just say he'll be here by the end of the month. There's a roster decision, 2 linebackers. One is vaccinated, one is not. Who are we keeping? The team is going to be cutting the player who is not vaccinated. That's like the situation that we're in right now, because it really is a competitive advantage to have as many vaccinated players as possible. I mean, we already know all the rules the league put out there. The Falcons are the first team to get to 100%. I know there are a couple of other teams that are very close to it, but a team like Minnesota, I mean, Kellen Mond is not vaccinated. Kirk Cousins is not vaccinated. Like, if they're a close contact anywhere, they're gone for a week. Like, that's a very tough situation to be in. So there is just a competitive advantage there for teams who have unvaccinated players. And I do know there are a handful of star players who are also not vaccinated right now. And that's going to be interesting in a lot of ways, because it affects not just, the games, but also, the betting aspect and all these different things that are going on around the NFL right now. So it's an interesting topic. I think it's only going to heat up this month, especially as teams start trimming their rosters down.
You can create some nightmarish situations with the unvaccinated players, and, I'm not even going to go to my total dark side of if somebody's unvaccinated, all it takes is one person to get in his face for a period of time and betting lines could be altered. You can, I hate to say it, but there are like horror situations that could happen with the league. The Raiders now requiring fans to be vaccinated to get in the stadium. Have we gotten any sort of pushback from that yet?
Nope. So I actually tweeted that last night. It happened at 11:45 here in the East Coast. I mean, most people were like happy about this. I think it's a good idea. I mean, there are other teams out there like the Bills who are requiring masks in stadium. Now, if you're talking about a stadium with 60,000 plus fans, how are you going to be able to control that? The Raiders were like, listen, we're not going to be able to control it. If you want to get in the stadium, you got to get vaccinated or else you're not getting in. And the overall response has actually been fairly positive. So I thought it would get pushback. It did not get that much pushback, to my surprise, actually, which is obviously a great sign.
How's it going in New York City? Because they're saying no restaurants, no shows, no anything indoors if you're not vaccinated. Are people upset?
There was a lot of pushback on that over here from people who are a little bit anti-vax, but overall, I haven't actually seen it implemented, at least not in my area. Like, I think like when I walked into a restaurant just last week, there was no guy who was standing there saying, hey, are you vaccinated? So I haven't seen it implemented as much. I have seen the reports, but when it did happen and when it came out, it did get a lot of pushback here because unfortunately, there are people here who are not ready to get vaccinated. And that's just the matter, the reality of the situation right now.
It is going to be another strange year indeed. All right, we're glad you're on our team and really appreciate all your work and can't wait to see what happens with our PFF news division this year. It's going to be great.
For sure, Chris. We're building something special. I'll tell you that much. It's going to be a process, but we're going to see the results here very soon. It's going to be amazing.
All right, we'll be right back with Doug Kyed. But first, a reminder that there is more preseason football this weekend. And if you listen to George and Eric on the PFF forecast, you know that you should be heading to the DraftKings Sportsbook app ASAP. The special this week is easy. Pacquiao versus Ugas. It's this weekend, and DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app, is offering 100-1 odds on a punch being landed at any point during the fight. Now, I don't know much about MMA, but I know there'll be at least one punch landed. So you get $100 no matter what. That's right, $1 for either fighter. They land a punch, get you $100 in free credits. So download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code PFF when you sign up to turn $1 into $100 in free credits when you bet on either fighter to win and a punch is landed during the fight. You can place your bet and watch the fist fly. Don't forget that's code PFF to turn $1 into $100 in free credits only at DraftKings Sportsbook. All right, Doug, well, welcome into the Chris Collinsworth podcast. I've got to say, I've just enjoyed listening to your guys' show so much. It's all the breaking news, and I always wanted to have our own ESPN version of Adam Schefter and just go, hey, we've got all these contacts with the teams. We've got all these relationships. It sure would be nice to parlay that into what I think we're all looking for. Every time my cell phone blinks, I look down and want to know what's going on around the National Football League. But welcome into PFF, and how's it been going so far?
It's been awesome so far. I've really been enjoying it. I was on the Patriots beat for 8 years, so it's nice to take a wide look at the entire league now and really be able to reach out to all the different sources that I've made around the league to get all of that info that you're talking about. So it's been fantastic so far.
Well, we're going to cover as much as possible with all three of you guys today. And why don't we just start where your old hometown was and in New England in the quarterback competition there. It is, I think it's been as interesting a week one preseason as I've ever been around, just because of all the stories with the quarterbacks. I'm going to throw not just the rookie quarterbacks, but Jordan Love as well. It's like, I've been waiting to see him, you know. But I think that maybe Mac Jones surprised people a little bit, maybe surprised me a little bit watching him play in that preseason. And it just looks so much more like the old Brady offense, especially that 2 tight end set that they used to run back in the day. But Mac Jones kind of has a similar body type, a movement kind of thing, but he was very calm, very relaxed in the pocket. He looked good in that game.
Yeah, I thought he looked poised, and he's kind of that throwback type quarterback. And he can actually move a little bit too. I was at a training camp practice a week ago, and he was making some throws on the move that I didn't really know that he could make heading into that practice. I know we saw a little bit of that at Alabama, but no, you're absolutely right. He's allowing them to run what they did for so many years with Tom Brady. And that's not to compare him to Tom Brady, but because of that, I do think that he's got a legitimate chance to start this season. And I think he's still in the running, possibly to start in week 1 for New England.
How difficult do you think it is for the Patriots? Because one of the things that I thought they might do is make a big move somewhere in this draft to go get Justin Fields. Then you've got Cam Newton and then a similar body type that would follow him. So you would basically be creating one offense. With Cam Newton as your de facto starting quarterback, you've got one style of offense. And really with Mac Jones, you're probably going to have something a little bit different than what you're going to do with Cam. So are we seeing 2 completely different offenses being run, whether it's Cam or Mac in their quarterback?
I don't think it's 2 completely different offenses. I would say that there's another element and some limitations when Cam Newton's in there. They might not be able to do everything that Mac Jones will be able to do, in the no huddle and just processing and everything. But then you also add in the athleticism of Cam Newton. That's going to add a different element as well. But I think that that's one of the reasons why the Patriots are giving both of those quarterbacks so many reps with the first team offensive line and with the first team offense, because those guys have to get used to both styles of quarterback. They can't just be used to Cam Newton out there. And then if the Patriots have to pivot and go to Mac Jones, then they would all be a little bit lost. So I think that that is one of the big reasons why they're each sharing so much time in the top offense.
It's interesting. Mac Jones did have the highest PFF grade among all those rookie quarterbacks with an 82, which is really excellent. Average depth of target was good, over 7, 13 for 19, 87 yards in that game. So let the beat go on. So far, Cam Newton is the starting quarterback, so nobody's blinking yet. The other one, of course, that's getting all the attention is Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance in San Francisco. Now, everything that I read and heard out of San Francisco was that Trey Lance had dazzled. I mean, every practice, he was 14 for 15. He was this and that. He comes out in that game. He hits the opening shot, 80-yard touchdown pass. Everybody's losing their mind, maybe not quite as much as they are in Chicago, but on the same sort of scale. And then it was a little less than that. Trey Lance, started off looking like he was going to be the next Hall of Fame quarterback out of San Francisco. But it really, he made some mistakes in the second half of his appearance there.
Yeah, I think that everyone remembers the big plays off the start for Trey Lance. But yeah, it wasn't always pretty in that game. Had the fumble. Definitely an up and down performance for Trey Lance. But they're going to give him time. I really think, I believe them when they say that they want to stick with Jimmy Garoppolo as long as possible. Even just look at how the snaps are being divided up in training camp so far. I think I read the other day that Trey Lance has only got 4 reps with the first team in practice. So that tells you right there that they're not ready to hand over the reins to Trey Lance yet. I think that that's probably the smart thing to do for the 49ers. I know that Jimmy Garoppolo has got his limitations in that offense, but you saw how well it went for the Kansas City Chiefs back when they had Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes. Rested Mahomes for a whole year, then turned it over to him. I think that you could be seeing something similar this year with the 49ers, where they give it to Jimmy Garoppolo until he gets hurt, falters, or for the rest of the season, and then really turn it over to Trey Lance in 2022 once Jimmy Garoppolo moves on.
Yeah, I think the other thing is that unlike any of the other situations, even Chicago with Andy Dalton, I don't think you're going to enhance Andy Dalton's trade value if you let him play. I do think Jimmy Garoppolo's trade value could be enhanced. So let's say it plays out like this, because San Francisco is a good-looking team. I mean, no matter what, they're a good-looking team. And Nick Bosa is going to come back. You're going to get a lot of what they didn't have, George Kittle a season ago. But as you look at it, is it possible that Garoppolo could get them off to, let's say, a 5-1 start even? And all of a sudden, now you're starting to hear from Houston, or some team has a starting quarterback, maybe Dallas, that has a key injury, and they're just not wanting to wait on next season and give up. So now all of a sudden you can make a deal for a Jimmy Garoppolo, and now you insert Trey Lance after he's gotten a chance to watch Garoppolo, work during the regular season, because it's different. Preparation, what you see in games, it's all different than what you ever see in preseason. I just think they have a chance to enhance Garoppolo's value a little bit based on if he got off to a hot start.
No, I completely agree with you. I think it's probably more likely maybe that Garoppolo will be traded after the season, just because there would be some risk there for the 49ers if they do get off to such a hot start. They turn it over to the rookie, and then suddenly the wheels kind of fall off there. But it is interesting that you mentioned Houston, because I actually think that it's a legitimate possibility that could be Jimmy Garoppolo's next landing spot. I do think that there's still a connection there between Jimmy Garoppolo and Nick Caserio. I think that whether that is this season, if he gets off to a hot start, or even after the season, once they're really ready to turn it over to Trey Lance, I think that the Garoppolo could be moved over to Houston. Obviously, some other chips have to fall before that happens. Deshaun Watson would have to be traded. Davis Mills couldn't obviously emerge this season, but that's definitely something to watch for in the future, is Jimmy Garoppolo headed to Houston.
Yeah. Just one other note. I can't let you get out without talking about Justin Fields a little bit. Because he was just the opposite. He sort of started slowly in that game. I don't even know if they picked up a first down the first 2 or 3 series that they had. But then you started to see the scrambling. You started to see the running. You started to see some of the ad-lib plays that sets apart a guy who's 230 pounds and runs a 4.4 or whatever. I mean, I've never seen a monster like this. And you start to project ahead to opening night on Sunday Night Football, and Aaron Donald working against that Bears offensive line that's really kind of a mess right now. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. You've got Jason Peters, who's signed, who's 38, who I think may be a Hall of Fame player down the road, but it's kind of let you in on just how desperate that football team is right now with that offensive line situation. Are they better off with a Justin Fields where at least he can move and escape a little bit?
They probably are. I mean, like you said, that offensive line is a mess right now. They took a risk there where they drafted Tevin Jenkins, who was a right tackle in college, and just expected him to slide into that left tackle spot right away. And that really hasn't worked out. Tevin Jenkins has been hurt all summer now. So then they had to pivot and bring in Jason Peters. So yeah, I think it would, in an ideal situation, they would have that athletic quarterback there in Justin Fields, who, like you said, runs a 4.4 at 230 pounds, unbelievable athlete. But they also might think, all right, let's see how the rest of the team looks before we just throw the rookie out there, because they do have that safety net, at least in Andy Dalton, to kind of get a feel for the rest of the team before they put Justin Fields out there. But I mean, from everything that I saw at Ohio State, Justin Fields looked pro ready. Everyone was raving about him before the draft. It was pretty amazing how far he actually then fell in the draft. So I would still say that Andy Dalton's likely to start in week 1, but that's no guarantee to last. I think that there's a clear path for Justin Fields to take over there pretty early in the season.
Do you think there's a chance Andy Dalton was guaranteed to start on opening day? Because there was a little bit of a bidding war going on for Andy Dalton at the time that he signed with the Bears. And one of the reasons he signed with the Bears was that he was sort of almost guaranteed that he would be the starting quarterback. Nobody could have foresaw what happened on draft night with the Bears trading up and getting Justin Fields. So was there some promise made, do you think?
It's possible. I mean, just the way that they've handled it from the beginning, where they even announced him on Twitter as QB1, and that was way back in the spring. And I think that people kind of laughed at that on Twitter, but I think it's possible. I think it's possible that they said, hey, no matter what happens, you're going to be our starting quarterback in week one. And like I said, I mean, that's certainly the way that it looks. But yeah, I mean, like you said, I think that there was a lot of interest in Andy Dalton this offseason. I think that he could have gone elsewhere, but this was at the time his best chance to start. And now it obviously complicates matters to have Justin Fields in there, but I do still think that it's his job.
We're going to talk a lot about some of the other quarterbacks with a few of the other guys coming up. Let's go on to some key injuries here. Rashad Bateman, who is supposed to be the cure-all really for the Ravens passing game coming in. He had surgery on that groin, and you just have to wonder now with a rookie missing so much camp, he's not going to be back for a couple of months probably. What does that do to that football team?
It's tough. It's really tough because Rashad Bateman looked great in the training camp practice that I went to a week ago. And it looked like he was really ready to emerge as that number one pass catching weapon in the Ravens offense. But now he's injured. Marquise Brown is still injured. Sammy Watkins has been on and off the field. So it really looked like that passing attack could have been transformed this season by adding in Bateman and bringing in Watkins and having Marquise Brown back. And now you kind of have to press pause on that because Bateman might not even be back until the end of September at this point. And then they're treading water with whatever they have left at that wide receiver position. It's a really tough situation in Baltimore because they really did make moves to improve that passing attack. And now it's all falling apart around them.
We're back to the running game again in Baltimore, play a little defense. Nothing ever changes. Where something has to change is in New York with Daniel Jones. He is certainly under pressure this season. This offensive line is going to struggle. There's just no way around that. I don't think they may have. I think Steve and Sam and some of the guys have that as the worst offensive line in football. Does Daniel Jones have a fair shot with the Giants given what he has to work with?
He almost has to. I feel like this is a make or break year for Daniel Jones. And it's interesting. I almost think this is an underreported storyline of Daniel Jones entering year 3 in New York. And you wouldn't think that because New York's clearly the biggest media market in the country. But I mean, the first 2 years of Daniel Jones, it hasn't gone that well. I know that he was certainly better in year 2 by his PFF grade than he was as a rookie. So there appears to be some upward trajectory there, but the raw stats certainly weren't there. As you said, the offensive line's not going to help him much, but they did build around him this year, at least. They did bring in Kenny Golladay. They've got Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard coming back. They drafted Kadarius Toney, though it looks like he's certainly off to a slow start there. So, and then getting Saquon Barkley back is huge as well. Just look at the running backs that he had to work with last year. That was pretty ugly. So I think that certainly the offensive line's not going to be a strength, but he's got enough weapons around him that I think that you are at least giving him a fairer shot than he had last year when he really had neither. You didn't have the offensive line or the pass catchers on that team.
Yeah, just 8-18 as a starting quarterback. And sooner or later in New York City, it's like you got to pay the piper here a little bit. There's some interesting stories going on, and we had not talked about this, but the other thing that happened over the weekend is the Atlanta Falcons came out and were 100% vaccinated.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled because that's our first preseason game. So I'm going in the room with those guys. But this is becoming more and more a big story in the league, isn't it?
It is. And I think that one thing that you certainly have to look at there with Atlanta too is at this point, obviously they're going to make some roster cuts, but at some point they're going to need to bring in some new players. You think they're going to sign an unvaccinated player at this point now that they've reached 100% vaccination rate? I don't think so. And there's still a lot of those free agents who are floating out there who are unvaccinated. I don't think that the Falcons are now going to want to break that streak. So for those free agents that are out there, that puts even more pressure on them, I'd say, to get vaccinated just so that they can get a shot around the league, because I think that this is just going to keep building. I think other teams are going to reach that 100% vaccination status. And then obviously, once again, they're also going to want to bring in more vaccinated players.
Doug, I could go on all day with you. I greatly appreciate it. I want to introduce as many people on our media team as I can today. So thanks very much, and keep it rolling. You guys are doing a fantastic job. I listen to every one of your podcasts just to get caught up with what's going on. And congrats on a great start.
I really appreciate it, Chris. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thanks very much to Doug. We are now going to move on to our cap expert and Brad Spielberger. And Brad, welcome to the Chris Collinsworth podcast. I've been listening to you guys on the other show, and it's fun. All the breaking news and your updates with all the salary related stuff. For people who don't know Brad, he used to work with the Minnesota Vikings, and he's a proud graduate of Tulane Law School and worked for OverTheCap.com, and we stole you. So I'm not even ashamed of it, but you've been a great asset to us. And there's so many different things going on. And we were just talking off the air a second ago that August really has historically been a pretty big movement kind of time. But I would think this year with the veteran players, and now that these teams have had a chance to see their young players in camp, and the salary cap being so much reduced over what it was expected to be, this could be crazy at the end of August, couldn't it?
100%. And I think the big thing too is for some guys, you're getting a look at 2 years of draft classes or 2 years of, rookies, because you didn't have an off season last year. So much more ability to see a lot of young players. As we discussed last time I was on, thanks for having me back. A lot of guys that have great surplus value contracts and teams try to build around. So I definitely think just like the last couple of years, going on the list quickly, Yannick Ngakoue was the big move last year. Laramie Tunsil moved this time a couple of years ago. Khalil Mack moved around this time a couple of years ago. I think that, coupled with the fact that we have some teams here that I think really recognize there's a window for them, whether it's with an aging quarterback like a Pittsburgh and Ben Roethlisberger, or Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers. And I think this player empowerment era, beyond just those guys wanting more money for themselves, I think also is saying, let's pay some guys, let's make a push. And I think we could see that across the league.
It's interesting. Geno Atkins, for example, the Dallas Cowboys just lost Neville Gallimore, who I guess was going to be their 3 technique this year. And now you start going, okay, now they've had issues a year ago on the defensive side, now a struggle. Is it possible that some of these free agents start getting picked up? Richard Sherman, for example. I mean, I'm sure Richard wanted X for a salary to come back, and now it's probably much lower if, in fact, he wants to come back and play. Are some of these veterans now going to be in a position where they're going, wow, I really am going to have to take a big cut if I want to come back and play football?
I think the big signal there to me was the Justin Houston deal in Baltimore to just get $3.5 million in base value. Yes, there are some incentives there to boost that, but when you look at some of the kind of older guys that had been cap casualties from their prior teams, all have warts for whatever reason. Melvin Ingram, very good player, just signed with Pittsburgh, but missed half the season last year. You mentioned Geno Atkins. Similarly, Justin Houston was a very good football player last year, has been a good football player for a very long time. Obviously signed a record contract at some point in his career not too long ago. So as a guy who's used to holding out and getting good money, and still had to ultimately just take a deal that is frankly beneath what he's worth. I think the rest of the market now needs to understand that's where we're operating, because the money is just gone at this point.
Yeah, a lot of it's gone to Josh Allen, who came out and he got paid. That was good for Josh. He deserved it. He had a fantastic season a year ago. But it is quite the opposite for these young quarterbacks, because one good year, which is really what Josh had. He had one not good. He had a great year last year, but it's not going to be easy. I mean, tell me about that deal, and maybe tell me a little bit of how it's ultimately going to impact the Baker Mayfields, the Lamar Jacksons of the world, as they now look for their contract too.
It sounds like this deal really did come down to the wire. There's been some great reporting about it. Oftentimes you see things in the media like, we're okay if a deal doesn't get done, we'll wait till next offseason. You think a lot of that's posturing and just kind of trying to increase your leverage as a club because you do have those years of control left. But it sounds like there really was a back and forth here, and they weren't, gonna come to an agreement. And the big sticking point and the big thing, which will not only impact Lamar Jackson and Baker Mayfield, but every quarterback extension going forward, is that the Bills were able to point to the Patrick Mahomes mega deal and say this standard 4 years that a lot of quarterbacks have moved to, Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson, Jared Goff, Carson Wentz was this traditional 4 years because they want to get back to the market as soon as possible. They said, Josh, look, Mahomes is the best player in this league, and he took 10. So maybe you're not getting, we're not getting 10, but we're not taking less than 6. And I think that is going to be a tough hurdle to overcome. On the other side of the spectrum, from the player side, I think what essentially the teams have agreed with these quarterbacks is we don't want to follow the Kirk Cousins structure where you're going to get 3 or 4 or 5 fully guaranteed years right away, but they are going to have these rolling guarantees. So the guys' protections and assurances are very high. And frankly, it's just another way of them avoiding using the term fully guaranteed or letting it get out there that they do deals like that. But a fascinating deal for sure. $250 million for Josh Allen, not too bad. And I think Mayfield and Lamar, I think will also work down to the wire to get something done before week 1.
But we really don't see the new television deals kick in for another couple of years, right? Where they're going to get the full value of that. Is it possible that Patrick Mahomes actually took way undervalued? I mean, way undervalued for what he could have potentially taken out of the Kansas City Chiefs. And it kind of set the market for all these other guys, not only on contract length, but that $50 million barrier still exists where I still think that, I mean, what are they going to do? Not sign Patrick Mahomes? I mean, they had to sign him no matter what, right?
110%. No, I think it is one of, if not the best contracts in the NFL as of right now. You can just look at cash flows. So, ignoring the cap for a little bit, not to get too into the weeds, but a number we love to look at is 3-year cash flow. Obviously, these deals, don't tend to last forever. He got about $113.5 million in new 3-year cash flow. Josh Allen got just under $140 million in new 3-year cash flow. So Mahomes already getting surpassed by him. Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson got a stronger 3-year cash flow. So it is a phenomenal deal for the Chiefs. And Mahomes gave up a ton of control. I mean, look, maybe he said, I want to win. And if I do this, you better go trade for Orlando Brown and give him a ton of money. You better maybe extend Tyrann Mathieu. So maybe he's less willing to hear excuses or less willing to be patient. But he definitely gave them a phenomenal value.
Yeah. Are we seeing draft picks be devalued at all? I mean, for Seattle to give up 2 number ones, the Rams, won't have another number 1 pick until I'm 165 years old. Is there less value? Maybe those teams just expect that they're going to be in the playoffs, so it's going to be the bottom of the first round anyway. What is going on with that? It seems like a number of first round picks being thrown around for certain players is just part of the culture now.
My perception of it is that I think, and you could speak this as well, but I think there has forever been this thought of you can kind of build up a roster, you can draft and develop, you can build out every position, build good depth, all of those things. And then if you have, an average or below average quarterback, and we saw that, of course, for me growing up, the Trent Dilfers of the world, all these guys, a really good team could carry that guy. They could contend if they had a good defense and, an efficient offense that just did enough. I think now some teams are looking at and say, look, you mentioned the Seahawks. We have Russell Wilson. He's 33 years old now. His game is a little bit reliant on him dancing around back there. He does need his athleticism a little bit. What's the difference between kind of going all in a little bit for the next 3-4 years and then moving on, flushing the system and starting over, or like trying to go half measures and maybe make something work? I think there's just less patience. And I think teams realize if you have a franchise quarterback on your roster or subcategory, if you have a rookie contract quarterback who's pretty good but has the big savings, you kind of need to be aggressive because otherwise you're just kind of wasting an opportunity.
Is that what's going on in Pittsburgh right now? The signing of Joe Schobert, but they've got contract issues coming up. I mean, that was a tremendous defense a year ago. They maybe have 1, maybe 2 years left with Ben, something like that. Are they trying to push some chips in?
100%. To push all this money into the future, they restructured a couple guys again this past week. So they actually have about $15 million in cap space, which is near the tops of the league. They are. I think this is probably Ben's last year, like you said, maybe 2 more. And they're saying, look, people aren't super high on Ben, but again, it's your franchise quarterback, first ballot Hall of Fame guy. probably good enough that if everything around him is good, he could maybe just, like we saw with Peyton Manning in Denver, if things go well, he's not going to throw a game away for you. And I think all these deals in this past couple of weeks, the Ingram deal, the signing, and this now trade for Joe Schobert, pretty highly paid linebacker, is 100% indicative of that. And like you said, they also have two players that probably want to become the highest paid players at their position in TJ Watt and Minkah Fitzpatrick.
And deservedly so. I think it probably in Pittsburgh comes down to they change offensive coordinators. And last year, maybe in part because of Ben's elbow and the issues that he had, came a quick release, just get the ball out of his hands, short throw kind of offense. And I think even Ben has acknowledged that, maybe I wasn't feeling quite the way that I should have a season ago. But I do feel like there's a chance that we see a little bit more of the old style Steelers, maybe running the football more than ever, some deeper shots down the field, but all that's just so dependent on if that offensive line can hold up.
110%. And I think an interesting thing that actually Eric and I had been talking about was, are we maybe seeing some lines now where they realize if they're not very good pass protectors, but they're still going to cost some money because they're good pass protectors, a good example being an Alejandro Villanueva, their former left tackle, but they're not good in the run game, is it worth kind of paying that premium that comes with excelling in pass protection because we value passing so much? Whereas let's say this year, they still struggle in pass protection as they did last year, but they have a lot of youth. They have a lot of guys that play forward and can create these holes for Najee Harris, and they can lean on that more and then just pass when it's necessary and still get the ball out quickly because they probably need to, but at least they're not bad in both areas and both facets of play. And I think it is kind of an interesting thing to monitor going forward.
What other sort of veteran player extensions have you been monitoring here?
I think we've discussed safety, and I think it stays there at first. I think Tyrann Mathieu's situation is very interesting. I think he's kind of playing chicken and waiting for Jamal Adams to get done and hoping to use that deal. And I think Harrison Smith in Minnesota is in a similar spot. And both of those guys have seen some older safeties get deals recently. Devin McCourty got a solid 2-year, $23 million extension entering his age 33 season. So there's some precedent there. They still have every right to ask for a solid, near top of market deal. I think Chandler Jones probably does not show up to Arizona, or at least isn't 100% invested without new money there. After you bring J.J. Watt in, he wants to be invested in himself. So that'll be a very interesting one to see play out as well. And I think these teams are in a spot, all these teams, I think players are also trying to realize if the team has an impetus to win, and yes, you want to win every year, but you look at an Arizona, if Arizona wins 6-7 games this year, I think we'll probably see a new head coach, a new general manager, and so on and so forth. So when there's pressure like this, I think the players realize you can hold their feet to the fire, and it tends to work out.
One final question for you, and this is off the charts. We hadn't talked about this much, that in Chicago, you've got a coach and a general manager who are sort of on thin ice, right? Whether that's justified or not, you make the playoffs 2 out of 3 or 3 years, and all of a sudden you're on thin ice. And by our standards anyway, their quarterback play had not been very good during any of that time. But you've got coaches and GMs that now have to decide whether to play a quarterback or not play a quarterback in something that may hurt them or help them, depending on what they do. I mean, that's a tough spot for the whole organization, because now you're going to be looking at those decision makers and going, are they doing what's best for them? Are they doing what's best for the team?
100%, Chris. I'll tell you, I'm from Chicago. I'm lucky enough that I was actually in town last weekend. I have never heard a preseason game of anything as loud as Soldier Field was on Saturday when Justin Fields trotted out onto the field for his first series. And they didn't do anything for his first 3 or 4 series, and still the 5th and 6th and 7th one, him coming out, people were standing up. The place was almost full for a preseason game. So I think we talk about the aspect of that, of are they protecting themselves? I think fans and also the locker room, it gets to a point where if Fields is going to look better than Dalton day after day after day, the locker room eventually is going to say, look, coach, you got to play this guy. Even if it may cause us to lose games, he just deserves the opportunity to show that he can do it. So I think that the pressure is coming from every direction, every angle. It will be tough to monitor because their schedule is an absolute gauntlet if you go check it out. But eventually the guy's got to get some reps and take some lumps and make some rookie mistakes because he is the future.
No doubt about it. And he could scramble, which might be needed in Chicago this year as well. You know, Trey Lance is the same situation in San Francisco. I mean, everything I've read about him in practice is he's been so dominant in practice. Maybe, you know, he had flash good moments in this game. I didn't think was great in the game, was good in the game. But you just wonder how unsettled that situation is too.
For sure. I mean, I guess for him, he's got Trent Williams, one of the highest paid left tackles in football, whereas the Bears just signed a 40-year-old Jason Peters, and he's allegedly going to be, contending to start at left tackle. So like you said, it's a good thing Fields can dance back around there because he's probably going to need to.
Yeah, the problem is that Trent Williams also just got hurt, so I don't know how bad that one is. So we will check that out as well. Brad, thank you very much. Awesome job as always. And we will check back in almost weekly during the season. So thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks so much for tuning in today with the PFF News Division. I love those guys. They've been hanging out all day, and it is going to be a fantastic year here at PFF. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Give it a little 5-star review. If you do that, I can hire more people to work at PFF. That'll be great. And we'll see you next week with another fantastic episode.